Hello guys, in this video we're gonna be making this cute shirt. So I flipped my dad's dress shirt into this and I'm super happy with the way it turned out. I had to learn a few new techniques such as, I don't know if it's called shirring, something like that, shirring, and then darts, and then yeah, so there was a lot that I had to learn, but it was super fun.
So this is what the shirt looked like before. It was just one of my dad's old dress shirt button up type of a thing.
The best way is you kind of like pull it apart. Here it's kind of like thicker, but you pull it apart and then there's these like loops and then you can rip them. And then basically you just continue that. And that way, so when I first started it, I ripped like the loops that were on the top of the fabric to make sure I didn't put a hole in it, and then that's how I did it, just to be safe.
So the next step is to cut off the sleeves and then you'll save them for later. So I used a rotary cutter, but you can use fabric scissors, regular scissors. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the shirt, what you're going to want to do is cut off the seams. So you're going to have to cut it off, like detach it from the front and the back. So the next thing you're going to want to do is detach the top of the back piece. This will just give you like a big chunk of fabric to work with. You're also going to want to do this to the front, so you're going to detach it right under the collar. Then you're going to cut off the underarm area, so kind of like just the little part that sticks out where the sleeve would have been attached, just that way you have a straight edge along your piece of fabric. And then you would also repeat this for the back and also the other side. Next, you're just going to cut off right under the armhole. So the purpose of this, basically the whole idea is to kind of have like a rectangle of fabric. That's your goal. So then you're going to trim the bottom piece so it has a straight edge as well. Do this for both the front and the back pieces. So then you should have two rectangles, and it's totally okay if the back is slightly wider than the front.
So on to the next step.
So this is when I realized that for the size of elastic I would need for like just the length of my back, I guess. The back piece was a little bit too small just because for if I want it to be really scrunched, I want to make sure I had lots of fabric. So I just reused the top of the back piece and then I trimmed it to form a rectangle and I sewed it on just to give me a little bit extra room. Then I saw that since it's a striped shirt, the stripes would be going opposite ways if I sewed it on the way I originally intended. So I just cut it in half, and then I would re-sew those edges to form a rectangle, just that way the stripes would be going the same direction. Then I sewed so the two like tiny squares or rectangles, not exactly sure what they were. They look like squares. So the tiny squares together, and then I sewed what became a rectangle to my other back piece. Okay, so this is my favorite part. So I spaced lines out 1 inch apart, and this is where you're gonna sew the elastic over to scrunch the back. Make sure to leave room for a hem, and I hemmed it after, which was kind of hard because it was all scrunched up, so it's kind of hard to hem. So not impossible, but definitely hem it before you sew in all the elastic. So you're gonna want to measure the elastic for your back. I kind of did it from like the shirt seams, so just that on my back, like the length. So make sure it's not too tight but not too loose, just kind of like comfortable, because it can always stretch. So for the shirring method, you're gonna switch your machine to a zigzag stitch, and you're gonna want to make sure you pull the elastic tight, that way it stretches across the whole fabric, and as you sew you'll start to see it scrunch up. So you can pull on the front, so what's gone through your machine, and then the back, and then this is what it looked like after the first row. So I try to line up my lines so that one of them would fall on the seam from the squares and rectangle method that we attach more fabric with in the beginning. Just that way it would like hide it and it wouldn't be super noticeable. Also, as you sew the elastic on, just make sure to give yourself a little bit of room in the beginning. So I don't think it turned out super noticeable when I sewed over the seam. The vertical one's a little bit more noticeable, but the fabric's scrunched up, so it looks okay. I just wanted to get another shot to kind of give you a better view of what it looks like while you're sewing it and stretching the elastic. Okay, so for now we're done, and on to the front piece. So for all the hems, including the front hem, which is this one right now, I pretty much did the same thing. So I just marked 1 inch, and then I folded it twice, and then sewed and pinned it and sewed along that just to give it a clean edge. You can also use an iron if that's helpful, just that way the folds kind of stay in place as you sew. So I had to learn how to do darts for this project. So I was a little bit intimidated at first, but when I had the fabric and I kind of looked and tried to see how it kind of fell naturally and where it was kind of like bunchy, and then I pinned that, and it took me a while to get it right. I kept trying it on and repinning, but I finally got it. They're still not perfectly 100% symmetrical, but I'm pretty sure it's good enough. But yeah, so just try to see where it falls naturally, and then you can also use some chalk or like mark it out if that's more helpful when you sew. Definitely for me it was helpful to sew with across like a straight line, just to make sure that my stitches were straight and everything, and then you're gonna pin it and sew, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. So I learned there are different parts of the dart, and so you're supposed to, I think about 1 inch under the point or the tip of the dart, you draw like a line, and it just lets you know, hey, you're getting close to the tip. And then once you get to that line, you reduce your stitch length to I think 1, and then you just basically sew right off the fabric, and then you can tie like a little knot to keep it secure, but don't backstitch or anything. So then you can iron the darts. I think it kind of gives a little bit of shape and flattens it out. You can use a rounded surface. I honestly didn't iron the second dart very well. The first one was definitely much better, but that's okay. Then because I didn't hem it before, I had to hem the back. So then I just had to hem the front, and it was the same thing, just 1 inch of fabric folded over twice. So then I just had to pin the front to the back, and I just sewed the seams. Next, moving on to the sleeves, I just cut off the excess and like the hem bit. Then I marked 1 inch and folded the fabric over once and pinned it to create an elastic casing. Because I ended up cutting the seam of the sleeve, I just went over it and backstitched a little bit just to make sure it wouldn't unravel. Then I sewed the elastic casing. You want to make sure you leave a gap, that way you can thread the elastic through afterwards, connect it, and then you would seal the gap. Next I cut off the bottom of the sleeve, that way it would be shorter and I just have a tube of fabric, and then after that I just made sure that both sleeves were about the same length. I recommend trying it on first, so I measured out the length that I wanted the sleeve to be and then 1 inch of seam allowance to hem it. So then just measure how long you want your elastic to be. Make sure it's not too tight but also not too loose. I end up having to go back for the one sleeve and fix it. Then with the safety pin you can just thread the elastic through. I lost the end the one time and had to rethread it, so try not to do that. With a zigzag stitch, sew the ends of the elastic together. Then seal up the little gap that you left to thread the elastic through. Measure the elastic where it fell on your arm. I did this about 1 inch away from the bottom. Then pin your sleeves in place. So I kind of pinned it so that the hem from the sleeve and then also from the top of the shirt would line up, and then I just sewed over top of that. I also used chalk to help me know when to start and stop sewing. And now for the big reveal.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Have a great day. See you guys later. Bye.